everyone, welcome back to Jesse's Hangout. I'm your host, Jesse. Welcome. I hope you guys are having an awesome evening or night wherever you're watching this or listening to this from. Don't mind my cat. Today's episode is going to be centered around the paranormal, and I'm going to tell you about some really creepy stories and tell you about whether or not they were actually real or just a bunch of creepy stories. But all in all, I'm going to talk about that and talk about where the stories came from and a little bit of background of these people who are demonologists and doing what they do. There's been a lot of skepticism about these two people who are demonologists, and I can see that. I can see a lot of skepticism and a lot of paranormal activity because there's a lot of people out there who are crazy and stupid and give paranormal people who actually really dedicate their lives into investigating this type of thing a really, really bad taste, a really, really bad name, so to speak, and I can see why there would be a lot of skepticism, but I'm one of those people that's really not skeptical about anything that has to do with paranormal. I'm pretty open when it comes to that. I've heard a lot of stories that are true, but I've also seen some made up ones, but they were really good ones, and they made for really good films. But there's also real ones out there that's happened to real families, and they've been absolutely terrified of it, and it's not something to be taken lightly. It's something to be taken very serious, especially if somebody's seriously going through something, whether it be a mental problem or something, but especially if they're actually going through a real supernatural thing, because it affects their relationships, it affects them as a human being, and it's just really terrifying and scary and mind-boggling to hear about somebody going through something that actually scared the hell out of them. So to speak, just scared the hell out of them. So, with that said, you guys have heard about The Conjuring and the Conjuring franchise, The Conjuring 2, what else? The Annabelle movies, the Amityville house, all the Annabelle series, I should say, the Amityville house, the Enfield pathologist, the trial of Amory Sherilyn Johnson, the Seeker house, the Nun trilogies, all that type of stuff. You've heard about these, and these are all based around, some of them are based around true stories or stories that have been told by Lorraine Warren from her experience of being a medium herself, being a clairvoyant medium. Sometimes you experience your own hauntings, your own self. The Nun being one of them. It was one of her many experiences as being who she is, that she felt really haunted by it and really scared by it, and it was one of the things that got turned into the Nun movie. It got also put in The Conjuring 2, and it also was mentioned a lot, and storylines too, but it was mentioned in those two movies a lot. That was just one of the many things that really wasn't true. Those stories didn't really happen, but it definitely was really told by Lorraine. It was one of those things that just haunts her, and that sometimes happens because sometimes clairvoyant mediums or mediums sometimes experience their own scary things, and it's very scary when they do that, and how they picture it and how they talk about it is pretty interesting, to say the least. And Lorraine Warren is a very interesting, very respected person by any paranormal investigator. She's also joined quite a few paranormal investigators in their investigations and paranormal activity that was really scary, that involved her paranormal expertise and demonologist expertise. Ed and Lorraine Warren had been doing this for years. One of their bigger movies that blew up, apart from the movies that I mentioned, was the Conjuring trilogy. The first Conjuring movie they made was actually based on an actual true story of an actual family that did move into a farmhouse that had 14 rooms, and they had 5 daughters, and it was Carolyn and Roger who had moved into this house. They put all their money into this house, and they were pretty much broke, very low class people. They really didn't have a whole lot, but just, the family and each other, and they were trying to find ways to make a new life for themselves and start fresh in a new place, and, move there and whatnot. One of the things that was said about this movie that wasn't true was the exorcism. Lorraine told people that Ed was never a priest and he would never perform an exorcism, and because he just wasn't a priest, but I'm pretty sure they've always called a priest to do the exorcism, so I'm assuming that's what happened. But they did do a lot of investigations into this house, this farmhouse. Carolyn herself really did dig deep into the house. She found history of the house, that the previous owners were actually, I don't know if they were actually descendants of this woman that lived there in the 1800s. It was said that I'm not going to say her name out, because I don't do that. That's just my preference. It was told about a woman who was like really just insane person who was into the dark arts of Satanism, and just really a dark person. She really was very scary, very cruel woman who died on that property. In the movie it said that she cursed that property, that whoever would own that property, they would die a very horrific, very horrifying deaths. And a lot of people who had owned that house after her did die under mysterious circumstances and died a horrific death, and it was very scary, and there was a lot of unexplained cases from that house. So when Carolyn found that out, it was very scary. I'm pretty sure when she found that out, it would have to have been really scary, especially being a mother of 5 daughters and being scared for their lives and being scared for her husband's life, because every time when they would hear scratching noises or something, even though Roger tried to not go down in that what they called a sand pit, but they portrayed it as like a little cellar in the movie, but it was actually a sand pit. He tried to stay out of that, but sometimes when that noise happened, it forced him to go down in there to find out what was going on, because it was driving his family nuts, and it was scaring them, and it was scaring him too as well. And there was also a lot of memories accounted from one of the daughters who would happen to have, I'm not going to say any names just out of respect, except for the parents' names. She had remembered what her mother had went through when that lady that used to live in that house in the 1800s was messing with her mother and possessing her and tormenting her, and just being really cruel, and some of the scary things that happened. And you would think somebody would be crazy, but you never really could truly understand it unless you experience it yourself. It's one of those things that you'll never fully understand why there's paranormal activity, why there's things the way that they are. You'll never really truly understand it, but it does happen. And this was one of the biggest stories that they did, along with those other movies that I had mentioned. I think there was, and some of those stories that were told really weren't actually true stories. Some of them were, but they were always based off of another story that was told by them, but they turned it into their own. So what was portrayed in the movie wasn't necessarily portrayed in real life, so to speak. There was another case that they went on. This one is like, this goes to show why there's so many skeptical people out there and why I can see that. But I can also see the point of view of paranormal investigators, because I'm totally a believable person for that. Everybody has their opinions when it comes to that, but that's just me. And I can see why. I can definitely see why, and you'll see what I mean when I tell you this story. This was the Hodge family. They lived in England. They really weren't really. They were like a lower class citizen. They really didn't have a lot. She had I think 3 or 4 kids, ranging from 12 and to 10, I think, or so. Her 11-year-old daughter, Janet, was experiencing a lot of strange things, or was said that she was said to experience a lot of strange paranormal activity coming from that house. That a room that she shared with her brother, she witnessed a drawer going from one place, her dresser going from one place to another, and there was just little clues and things. And when reporters went to that house a lot, they wanted to experience it for themselves. There was paranormal investigators that did that. There were some police officers said that they saw some things moving. But when Ed and Lorraine Warren came to investigate, they only investigated for like a day, but it was enough for them to realize that these kids were faking it. And with that said, it was really one of those stories that you just have to really not only keep an open mind, but also know that sometimes when you investigate these stories, sometimes it's fabricated, sometimes it's not real. And that's the one thing that a lot of paranormal investigators run into. They just don't show that part, because it's just one of those parts where it's just like, you don't want to embarrass the person that was faking it, but you also don't want to embarrass yourself, and you can't blame them for that. But there's a lot of investigators who definitely run into that. And I'm not gonna lie, that happens. It happens with anybody. Anybody can run into something like that, and especially when you're investigating. But you also have to keep an open mind in any case. And you can't judge a family or anybody until you've truly investigated them and you've really put your mind and thoughts and your manpower into whatever this is, whether it's real or not, or whether you're a skeptic or not. You just gonna have to keep an open mind when it comes to these. And they were really known for those movies, and they were known for that true story and some other true stories. They were also really known for their museum that housed the Annabelle doll, their museum of haunted artifacts from all the cases they had went on and all the cases that they had done. They would bring back whatever item was causing the problem back home, especially the Annabelle doll. It was also mentioned, the Annabelle doll wasn't not only mentioned throughout the one of the Conjuring movies, it was also mentioned throughout the Annabelle trilogy. There was also one where they did an Annabelle trilogy. I think it was Annabelle Comes Home or something like that, of centered around their daughter and her friend of hers being left at home, I think, with the babysitter, and their alarming experience with the Annabelle doll that was in a glass, and an experience with the haunted stuff. It was pretty creepy, but you also know that you also take from it that if you are skeptical or not, there's just some things in life that you just do not mess with. Whether you believe it or not, you just don't mess with it. Just don't mess with it. And, try to keep your kids out of it as much as you possibly can. And I think that just goes to show a lesson well learned for both of those young girls in that movie. Um, but you can also relate, because you can also relate to the characters. I mean, they went to school with a lot of people who thought that they were weirdos or being bullied. Sometimes that happens, and that fuels a lot of these paranormal stories. One other paranormal story I have, well, not really story, but one that I was watching that was really, really creepy and really, it takes a lot to creep me out, and this creeped me out really big. Ghost Avengers were going to a house that was owned by a murderer in the 1800s. Lizzie Burnett, she was accused of killing her family with an axe, and she was um, acquitted of, she was cleared of all charges, but everybody knew she did it. They just couldn't, they just didn't have enough evidence to prove that she did it, but they knew she did it. But she was released from it, and it was a really nasty case and a really brutal scene. And Zach and his crew went to stay in that house to see if they could get any paranormal experience, and they did. And it was a creepy experience for them, and it was a very bad experience for them. Zach has been through a lot of places in his life, but I think that one place, probably there was many others that probably scared him, but this one scared him. It scared me just watching it. It was just like, whoa. There's just like so many bad places who have so much bad history, can carry so much bad energy in them, and it's just unreal, and it's just crazy. It's just a crazy thought to see people go through that, and it leaves such a really bad negative effect on a house or a trinket or just anything. You just never really realize the history behind those items. It's really scary, and I can't really imagine what goes through their mind when they were sitting in that chair. And I can't really imagine what it's like for the families that we talked to. One of the families that actually went through something that they really did investigate that really was scary. I can't imagine what they went through, having 5 daughters and thinking everything you got into this 14-bedroom farmhouse and can't leave it till the 80s because you're financially your instability, you're unstable, and you can't move out, and you still live in that house even after everything that happened. That's gotta be scary. That's gotta be scary and very terrifying. I can imagine being in that position, though. But I also know that sometimes there are some good stories, there's some good scary stories that people make up, and some of them are pretty creepy. But you also got to keep in mind that sometimes there are some real stories out there of real experiences, and I've seen them. I've never personally went through them, but I've seen them. And just because you don't see something there doesn't mean that it's not there. That's just my opinion. But there's a lot of skeptical opinions out there, and that's totally fine. But just some of these stories I wanted to share with you guys. I thought it was pretty creepy. There's a lot of stories out there, a lot of episodes out there. There was one that I used to watch way back when. It was the most scariest places or the most haunted places on Earth. I've seen a lot of the Ghost Avengers go to really creepy places. There was a creepy abandoned hospital that's on an abandoned island. Creepy, creepy, creepy. Very creepy. A lot of bad stuff went on in that asylum. A lot of bad stuff goes on in asylums. There's a lot of bad history with some places, but there's also a lot of good history with a lot of places. But, you can't always take the bad, can't always take the good without the bad. There we go. So there's your quote for that one. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listening to me babble. I just thought I would share that with you. I thought it was interesting but very creepy at the same time. I hope that story, that little short story of that family I told you about, you guys should really go check out the Conjuring movies. I highly recommend it if you're really a horror buff person and like a good scare. Check out the Annabelle movies and the Conjuring movies, especially the Nun movie. That was some creepy stuff, so highly recommend you go check those out. And with that said, if you guys haven't subscribed to this channel, please hit that red subscribe button and that notification bell so you'll be notified when I upload podcast series and other videos as well. Also, if you wish to stay up to date with me more about the gaming community and just stuff in general, really, follow me on all of my social medias. They're listed under this podcast episode. Along with my main channel, It's Jessie Gamers. I do mobile gaming. Go check that out. I hope you guys have an awesome day or night wherever you're watching this from, and I will catch you guys in episode 4.